Hello, this is the Lord's Legion and welcome to a brand new video which is going to be somewhat experimental. Now recently I have seen a bunch of tier lists floating around on YouTube as if it is the next big trend, and given the fact that we have reached to the end of the Infinity Saga within the MCU, I thought now was the perfect time into doing a tier list featuring all of the villains from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, ranking them from best to worst. Now I just want to make this very clear in that this has nothing to do with their power level or in terms of their popularity, but this is just clearly my opinion and how I personally feel about these villains. And like I said, this is a bit of a trial run and I do want to see if you guys do enjoy having these tier list videos, and if you do enjoy them enough then I'll continue in making them, and if not I'll probably stick back to the countdown format. But without further ado, let's begin with the tier list. So as you can see, we have the actual tier list for the MCU villains, and from top to bottom we have the best of the bad, meaning that they are just simply the best within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then underneath we have great but a little lacking, therefore meaning that while these villains are actually really great, they do seem to lack in certain aspects. And then underneath that, in the next tier, we have potential is still there, meaning that while the villains didn't reach their true potential, that doesn't exactly mean that they are bad, and there is a chance for redemption for them. And then after that we have forgettable, which is pretty self-explanatory, and then right after we have no good at being bad, meaning that they are just simply crap at being villains. And then underneath we just have who, which are just kind of the villains that have no reason to exist, and they just, I don't know, they're just redundant. But at this point we may as well get on to the actual tier list itself, kicking off with the Monger, who is pretty much the first ever villain within the MCU, and already you would know that he would be placed pretty highly, given that he was the one who started it all, for better or for worse, despite the fact that most villains kind of follow in a similar big grey monster final boss villain type of thing. But truth be told, I do think Monger was a pretty solid antagonist for Iron Man 1, so therefore I do think that while he was somewhat generic near the end, I have to put him in great but a little lacking. Next we have the Abomination, who appeared in The Incredible Hulk, and even though he was pretty much a baddie version of the Hulk and that he was pretty forgettable for the most part, at the same time I do think I have to put him in the potential is there category, mainly because he is still alive, and I do have a bit of a soft spot for the Abomination in the comics anyway, and truth be told there is a chance that he could come back, whether it be in the Thunderbolts. Either way, I personally do think Abomination fits right at home in the potential is there category. And then moving on to the Iron Man 2 villains, starting with Whiplash, who, let's just be honest, he was completely forgettable, and I completely forgot about his character until the tier list was here, so, you know, that kind of speaks volumes. And then underneath we have Justin Hammer, who, despite the fact that some people really like the character because of how funny he is, I do think he's a complete wanker. So for that reason I'm just going to put him in the no good at being bad category. And moving on, we do have the God of Mischief himself, Loki, who appeared in as many MCU films as possible, and while I don't think he really counts as a villain these days, given his early appearances, I just have to put him in the best of the bad, and if I put him anything less, then I'm just gonna get crucified, so, you know. And then moving on, we do have the Red Skull, who appeared in Captain America the First Avenger as his first appearance, and even though he is pretty much a generic evil villain, at the same time he is too charming, and I just have to put him in the great but a little lacking aspect. Because at the end of the day, you know, it's the Red Skull, and Hugo even gave him so much life, and I just love the Red Skull personally. Then up next we have Male Kittif, or yeah, fuck that guy. Up next we do have the two villains from Captain America the Winter Soldier, starting up with the titular character, of course being the Winter Soldier himself, who doesn't really count as a villain at this point, but if I really have to give him a spot, then Maybe the potential is there because he's pretty cool, and if they ever bring him rogue again, then I think there's some potential for him to be a villain, so, you know, why the hell not? And then Alexander Pierce, well, you know, he had a pretty big part in the MCU, especially within the future with Hydra, despite the fact that they didn't really do much outside of that revelation, but you know what, I'm just gonna put him in the great but a little lacking, mainly because, well, it wasn't exactly his fault, they just didn't pick up from the entire twist with Hydra. And then moving on from that, we do have my boy Ronan the Accuser, who, it's kind of a tough one because he was kind of forgettable, but at the same time I thought he was a pretty fun villain personally, and while I wouldn't ever put him at the best of the bad or even great but a little lacking, I kind of want to put him to here, even though he's technically dead, but if the Captain Marvel sequel's anything to go by and that they're going to have it set in the past as well, then maybe they could reuse Ronan again as a bigger villain, but until then, I'm comfortable putting him there because I don't want to put him in the forgettable aspect. Then we have a pretty controversial one in the name of Ultron, who is just, you know, not everyone's cup of tea because he isn't exactly like the comic version of Ultron, but me personally, I think Ultron is one of the most underrated MCU villains ever, and he has a lot of bonus points for having both James Spader's voice, as well as even killing Quicksilver, which kind of puts him pretty high in my book, so for that reason, I'm gonna have to put him in the best of the bad, because, you know, I love James Spader, and I love Ultron, and even though this was a different version of Ultron, I still thought he was just as intimidating and as enjoyable as he was from the comics, for different reasons. And from Ultron, we have Yellow Jacket, who, despite of his cool design, is pretty forgettable, and given the fact that he was from the Ant-Man movie, I don't give a fuck about the Ant-Man films too much, so it's pretty much fitting for Yellow Jacket to be in the forgettable category. Next, we do have Zemo from Captain America Civil War, and much in a similar vein to Ultron, people didn't like this version of Zemo all too much because he wasn't like the comic book version of Baron Zemo, but to be fair, he is still alive, and so therefore he could become the Baron at any point near the future, so for that reason, I might put him in the potential is still there for Zemo, because, you know, there is potential for him to become the Baron, and even with that being said, I still thought he was a pretty solid villain, given the fact that he did pretty much defy the Avengers, so obviously he does get brownie points for that. Up next, we do have the Doctor Strange villain Caecilius, who many people would probably put in the forgettable aspect because he's pretty much an evil version of Doctor Strange, but being biased of Mads Mikkelsen, I have to put him in the great but a little lacking, and even then he did have a pretty solid backstory, and I thought that his presence alone was strong enough, even though he isn't exactly the deepest within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so giving him brownie points for the fact that it's Mads Mikkelsen, but still, I do think it's pretty fair to put him in the great but a little lacking category. Speaking of Doctor Strange, we also have the big ultimate bad Dormammu, who didn't really do anything in the movie, but to be fair, like with most of the villains here who are still alive to this very day, I do have to give him the spot of the potential is still here, mainly because they could do a lot more with him in the sequel, and given the fact that Dormammu is a pretty important character within the mystical realm of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there is no way in hell that they're just going to abandon this villain altogether. Speeding right through, we do have Ego the Living Planet from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and as much as I really want to put him on the best of the bad because he was so awesome and one of the only redeeming qualities of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, I do have to put him a little lower in the great but a little lacking, mainly because of the final act kinda harmed him in a way, much in a similar fashion to the Ironmonger, and even then, that's still a good spot to put Ego. Flying their way into the tier list, we do have the Vulture from Spider-Man Homecoming, and, you know, I never really cared about the Vulture in the comics, but you know what? I'll be really honest in saying that Spider-Man Homecoming made me give a shit about the Vulture, and I do love this version. And I think he has the best balance of everything, you know, being intimidating, relatable, and just being kind of personal to Spider-Man, so I do think it's pretty fitting to put him in the best of the bad, you know. Why the hell not? But then we get to a pretty controversial one in the name of Hela, who I really want to put in the best of the bad because, you know, I think she was such an awesome villain and she had so much potential, but like I said, unfortunately for Hela, they didn't really utilize her character much in Thor Ragnarok, which is such a shame. So for that reason, I might have to put her in great but a little lacking. Not exactly her fault per se, but it's more of the case of the fact that Thor Ragnarok didn't explore her character as well as they could have. And up next we do have Eric Killmonger, and I'm not even going to beat around the bush. He is easily within the best of the bad. It's no secret that he is one of, if not the greatest MCU villains of all time, or one of them at least to me. He's at least in the top 5. And, you know, I can't just put him anything below that. It's just unfair. And, you know, it just does Eric Killmonger a massive disservice. And speaking of the greatest villains within the MCU, Thanos easily takes the cake as being the best of the bad at the very top spot. And it really goes without saying because he did impact the MCU in ways we never saw coming, and you know, he was just that much of a dangerous threat who more than lived up to the expectations. And up next we do have Ghost, who appeared in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and you know, she did have some interest and promise, but unfortunately I found it to be somewhat forgettable. But at the same time, I feel like I have to put her in the potential is still there category, mainly because she's still alive for one, and two, I've heard rumours in that they're going to include her for the Thunderbolts movie, which I do think would be a pretty appropriate place for her. And then speaking of Ant-Man and the Wasp, we do have Sonny Burch, who, again, no good at being bad. Why should I even put him in there in the first place? And last but not least, we do have Yon-Rogg from Captain Marvel, and he was just kinda meh at best, so, you know, I'm just gonna put him in the forgettable category because, you know, he was pretty forgettable, but, you know, there's not much else I can say about him. But yeah, that's pretty much everything in terms of the MCU villains, and this is pretty much my personal tier list for the MCU villains, and I would be very interested on what you guys think of my tier list and where would you personally rank them from best to worst. And like I said, this is an experimental video. Like, if you want me to do more videos like these or more tier lists, I will probably do so. But if you guys prefer countdown lists instead of something like this, then I will probably do more of them too. But personally, I'll probably do a legitimate countdown video within a matter of days or weeks or however I decide. Yeah, I just want to hear everyone's feedback in relation to this tier list and if you guys want me to do more of these. But that's pretty much everything I want to say, and as always, thank you guys for watching this video. Please like and subscribe, take care and have a good one.